Everything works out when you decide it does. Stay with me on this one, because I know that sounds like something you'd scroll past on Instagram, some pleasant little affirmation sandwiched between a sunset photo and a coffee quote. But that line contains something most people will spend their entire lives missing, and I'm not being dramatic when I say that. It's a law, a principle, a truth that's been operating underneath every single event in your life, whether you've recognized it or not. Nothing moves until you do. Nothing changes until you decide. The world bends to the inner decree of the person who knows, genuinely knows, that their imagination is the architect of their reality. There's a point in every person's life where they have to confront the origin of their experiences, and most people never get there. They search endlessly for answers outside themselves, in other people, in circumstances, in fate, in luck, in some divine force they imagine operates independently of them. But there comes a moment, if you're fortunate enough to get still, where you recognize something that changes everything. Life unfolds from within. Every outcome, every victory, every delay, every struggle, every triumph. It all begins as a decision, a silent inner movement, a shift in assumption. You don't experience life as it is. You experience life as you are. And when you decide that things work out for you, the world rearranges itself to match that decision. Let that sink in for a second. So what does it actually mean to decide? Because it's not a wish, it's not a hope, it's not begging the universe to intervene on your behalf. Decision is inner conviction that needs zero external evidence to confirm it. It's the unwavering acceptance that what you've decreed within yourself is already so. Decision is the invisible engine behind every transformation, the invisible cause behind every visible effect. You decide, your world complies. You assume, and life mirrors you. Here's what most people get wrong about the human experience. They believe life is happening to them. In truth, life is happening through them. You're not the passenger, you're the driver. Your consciousness is the steering wheel. Your imagination is the map. And your feeling, that's the fuel. When you decide that everything works out for you, you ignite a chain reaction that cannot be denied. You move yourself into a state where outcomes align with that inner conviction. And you've already seen this. You just may not have connected the dots. Think about a moment when you were absolutely certain something would happen. Maybe it was something simple, knowing you'd pass an exam, knowing someone would call, knowing a problem would resolve itself. In those moments of certainty, did you notice that nothing could shake you? No fear, no doubt, no wavering. You'd already accepted the result internally, and because of that acceptance, the external followed naturally. That is decision. That is the power that shapes your life. Most people misunderstand the power within them because they confuse thinking with deciding, and there's a massive difference between the two. A person can think 1,000 thoughts about success, but if they decide only once in failure, failure is the outcome. Decision isn't measured in repetition, it's measured in depth. One thought felt with absolute conviction outweighs hundreds of thoughts tinged with uncertainty. The world responds to your dominant assumption, not your scattered hopes. Quick educational insert here, because this is important. Everything works out when you decide it does, because decision places you in the end. It positions you in the feeling of the wish already fulfilled. Once you occupy that state, life must bring you the circumstances that reflect it. You can't embody abundance and simultaneously experience lack. You can't embody love and simultaneously experience rejection. You can't embody confidence and simultaneously experience defeat. The external world does not contradict the internal state you're faithfully occupying. But decision requires courage. It demands that you abandon the familiar identity you've clung to for years. And that's the part nobody wants to talk about. Many people would rather suffer with the known than risk the unknown. They say they want change, but they want it without releasing the version of themselves that created their current reality. They want abundance, but cling to beliefs of scarcity. They want love, but hold assumptions of unworthiness. They want success, but nurture fears of failure. Been there, right? We all have. You can't decide for a new life while holding the beliefs of the old one. Decision means letting go. Decision means stepping into a new identity without proof. Decision means trusting the unseen more than the seen. Everything works out when you decide it does, because decision is the act of selecting your reality. Life presents infinite possibilities, infinite timelines, infinite expressions of self. Decision is the mechanism that places you in the one you prefer. When you decide that everything works out for you, you're not forcing outcomes. You're aligning with the version of yourself for whom things naturally work out. You're stepping into the state where ease is normal, where solutions find you, where doors open, where opportunities appear, where timing aligns, where every detail supports your good. And once you make that decision, life begins to reflect it in ways both subtle and dramatic. You may notice small signs at first. Things that once stressed you suddenly resolve themselves. People shift in your favor. Unexpected help arrives. Plans fall into place effortlessly. Synchronicities multiply. You begin to see that life responds to your inner world like a perfect mirror. And as your conviction grows, the manifestations grow with it. What once seemed impossible becomes ordinary. What once felt distant becomes natural. But here's what you need to understand about temporary appearances. They are not permanent obstacles. Life will always reflect your dominant assumption, not your temporary emotional reactions. You may feel doubt, but if your underlying decision remains firm, the doubt can't override it. You may feel fear, but if your deeper conviction persists, the fear has no power. Emotion is not decision. Feeling a momentary worry doesn't cancel your manifestation. What matters is the state you return to. Decision anchors you. It keeps you rooted in the end long after the fleeting waves of emotion pass. Everything works out when you decide it does, because decision alters your reactions. When something appears to go wrong, you no longer fall into panic or negativity. Instead, you respond from this calm knowing that the outcome is already assured. Even the obstacles begin to serve you. Even the delays become part of the greater orchestration. Instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me?" you say, "I know this is leading somewhere better." That shift in perception is what transforms experience. You no longer interpret events from fear. You interpret them from power. Think about what that would actually feel like for a second. Waking up each morning knowing that no matter what happens, things are working in your favor. Walking through challenges with the quiet certainty that they're temporary shadows cast by a reality already unfolding for your good. Making decisions from strength instead of fear, from vision instead of limitation, from conviction instead of doubt. That is what inner decision gives you. It frees you from the tyranny of external circumstances. It gives you the authority to choose how your life unfolds. And you've seen this play out already. People who expect good things tend to receive them. People who expect problems find them everywhere. This isn't luck. This is the law of consciousness. What you assume, you experience. What you decide, you become. Many people unknowingly decide for disappointment. They expect plans to fall apart, so they do. They expect people to mistreat them, so they do. They expect money to be difficult, so it is. Decision is always active, whether conscious or unconscious. So the question becomes, are you deciding from fear or from power? From limitation or from possibility? From your past or from your vision? Everything works out when you decide it does, because decision is faith in motion. And I want to be clear about what I mean by faith here. Faith isn't belief in something external. It's belief in the creative power of your own consciousness. When you decide that everything works out for you, you're declaring that your inner world is the cause and your outer world is the effect. You're placing authority back where it belongs, within yourself. And when you live from that truth, life bends to your inner command. Now, some of you are thinking, but Mike, what if things look bad right now? What if the situation is urgent, painful, overwhelming? That is precisely when decision is most powerful. Anyone can feel confident when life is smooth. The true mastery is remaining faithful to your inner choice when appearances try to contradict it. This is the swimming analogy I come back to over and over. When a non-swimmer gets thrown in deep water, they thrash, they panic, they exhaust themselves fighting the very thing they need to surrender to. But an experienced swimmer, they float. They slow down to speed up. Same thing here. Don't wrestle with the outer world. Don't argue with circumstances. Don't allow temporary appearances to dictate your belief. Stand firm in the decision that everything works out for you, and life must reorganize itself accordingly. The outer world is slow to change, not because it resists you, but because it's the reflection of past assumptions. Give it time to catch up with your new decision. The moment you decide, something shifts internally. That shift is real. That shift is the seed. The outer world will show you the fruit. Everything works out when you decide it does, because decision anchors you in the version of yourself who already has the outcome. And this is the part that most people never discover. To change your life, you must change your identity. You must become the version of yourself for whom the desire is already fulfilled. How would that version of you think? How would they feel? How would they walk, speak, respond, trust? Embody that version now, and the world has no choice but to match it. Decision is identity. Identity is destiny. Decide that everything works out for you, and you become the person for whom that is true. Decide that you are supported, and support appears. Decide that you are chosen, and you are. Decide that you are successful, and success finds you. Decide that you are abundant, and abundance becomes natural. Decide that life favors you, and evidence of that favor emerges repeatedly. Don't underestimate the simplicity of this truth. The mind loves complexity. It loves to analyze, dissect, doubt, question, and seek endless explanations. But reality responds to clarity. One clear decision has more power than 1,000 scattered efforts, and you know you've decided when you feel relief, when you feel ease, when you feel a subtle shift within you, as though the burden has lifted. Decision brings peace because it ends the inner conflict. You no longer waver between possibilities. You've chosen, you've committed, you've anchored yourself in the end, and that inner anchoring creates a magnetic pull that draws the manifestation toward you. Everything works out when you decide it does, because decision changes your perception of time. You no longer rush. You no longer worry about when or how. You know the fulfillment is inevitable. You walk differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself with an inner assurance that others can sense. People begin to treat you according to your new state. Opportunities that once seemed unavailable begin to flow effortlessly. And when the manifestation arrives, you'll realize it came not because you forced anything externally, but because you shifted internally. It came because you decided. It came because you lived in the end. It came because you assumed the feeling of the fulfilled desire. Everything works out when you decide it does. This isn't a motivational slogan. It's a law, the foundation of conscious creation, the secret behind people who seem to live blessed lives. Their outer success isn't the cause of their confidence. Their inner confidence is the cause of their success. They decided long before the evidence appeared. So now the question isn't whether this principle works. It always works. The real question is, will you use it consciously? Will you decide for yourself? Will you claim the power that has always been yours? Will you choose the reality you desire instead of reacting to the one you inherited from past assumptions? You're free to decide at any moment, free to choose a new outcome right now, free to step into a new identity right now. Nothing is stopping you except the belief that something external must change first. But the truth is, when you change internally, everything external follows. Everything works out when you decide it does, because within the quiet chambers of imagination, you're shaping the script from which life takes its cues. Every person you meet, every opportunity you attract, every turn of events that appears in your path. It's simply the output of the inner decree you silently affirmed. When you claim with certainty that things work out for you, you're not persuading the world. You're instructing it, telling it what role it must play in your experience. The outer world is obedient to the inner command. It must follow what you've internally assumed. And when that assumption is infused with conviction, nothing can oppose it. If you truly understood the power of a decided mind, you would never again worry about timing, delays, or appearances. You would never again plead for outcomes. You would simply turn inward, select the reality you prefer, occupy it with feeling, and allow the external world to rearrange itself in your favor. Life becomes remarkably simple when you stop fighting the reflection and start mastering the cause. Decision is the cause. The world is the effect. There's a profound relief that emerges when you finally accept this. You realize you no longer need to chase, force, manipulate, or control. You no longer need to convince anyone. You no longer depend on others to validate your worth or confirm your possibility. Once you decide, your path becomes illuminated by a certainty that can't be shaken. You begin to walk through life as someone who knows the outcome long before the evidence appears. But decision is an art. It's a subtle shift in self-perception. The moment when you stop thinking about the desire and begin thinking from the desire. You no longer see it as something you want. You see it as something that is already yours. You no longer imagine the possibility. You imagine the fulfillment. You no longer ask whether it will happen. You assume it already has. That is the moment of decision. It is quiet, it is internal, and it is powerful. People misunderstand decision because they try to combine it with doubt. They try to decide while still entertaining what ifs, fears, worst case scenarios. But decision eliminates alternatives. When you decide, truly decide, you burn the bridge to failure. You close every door except the one that leads to fulfillment. You inhabit the state so fully that it becomes more real to you than what your senses currently show. The senses follow. They don't lead. The inner state leads. And the outer world follows with perfect precision. When you decide that everything works out for you, you begin to notice a shift in your emotional climate. You feel calmer, lighter, more grounded. Your reactions soften. You stop interpreting challenges as threats. You stop panicking at every delay. You stop assuming the worst. You begin to interpret everything through the lens of your new assumption. If something goes wrong, you assume it's part of the greater unfolding. If someone says no, you assume something better is coming. If a plan collapses, you assume it's making space for a superior one. Decision changes interpretation, and interpretation changes experience. The mind that has decided doesn't get swayed by appearances. It doesn't fear the unknown. It doesn't cling to certainty in the external world because its certainty comes from within. And this internal certainty has a magnetic quality. It draws to itself the people, events, and circumstances that match its frequency. You begin to live in alignment with the version of yourself whose life works out effortlessly. You meet people who support your vision. You encounter opportunities you once thought were rare. You find yourself in the right place at the right time repeatedly. Life becomes cooperative instead of combative, and none of this is accidental. It's the effect of a deliberate internal shift. When you decide that everything works out for you, you elevate your state of consciousness. You move into a higher level of expectation, and expectation is creative. What you expect, you experience. What you anticipate, you attract. The world always rises to meet your assumption. You've already seen this at work in your life, even if you didn't recognize it. Think about the times when you were convinced something would go wrong. Didn't it often go wrong? Think about the times you were sure something would turn out well. Didn't it usually unfold exactly as you expected? This isn't coincidence, it's law. Your assumption, your decision, creates the framework within which life must operate. That's why it's so essential to decide consciously rather than passively. Many people live their entire lives without ever consciously choosing their assumptions. They allow fear, memory, past experiences, and the opinions of others to decide for them. They live in a reactive state, constantly responding to external circumstances rather than generating them. But once you understand that decision precedes experience, you step out of reactivity and into authorship. You become the scriptwriter of your life, instead of an actor reciting lines someone else wrote. When you decide that everything works out for you, daily life becomes a different experience entirely. You begin thinking as the person whose life is full of solutions rather than problems. You begin responding with clarity rather than fear. Your inner dialogue transforms from worry to assurance. You speak to yourself differently. You carry yourself differently. You make choices as though the universe supports you, because it does. You expect success, and success gravitates toward you. Even the people around you notice the shift. They may not know what changed, but they sense something in your energy, your presence, your manner of being. You become someone who naturally attracts support, respect, and opportunity. And this isn't because you became more fortunate externally, it's because you became more aligned internally. Everything mirrors the self. Decision also creates resilience. When you decide that everything works out for you, you no longer crumble under pressure. You no longer collapse in the face of setbacks. You no longer see difficulty as opposition. You see it as direction. You understand that every obstacle is either temporary or transformative. And because you hold the assumption that things ultimately resolve in your favor, even the challenging moments lose their power to intimidate you. Think about the most triumphant moments of your life. They were preceded not by luck, but by some inner shift, a determination, a firm intention, a silent certainty that you were going to succeed no matter what. You decided, consciously or unconsciously, and the world stepped into alignment. Now imagine living with that level of inner conviction every day. Imagine how different your decisions would be, how different your habits would be, how different your identity would become. The gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't measured in time or distance. It's measured in identity. Who you are being internally determines what you experience externally. Decision is identity in motion. When you decide that everything works out for you, you're choosing the identity of someone for whom that is true. And the moment you choose that identity, life begins to reflect it. There is no limit to what you can decide for yourself. You can decide that love flows into your life with ease, that money comes effortlessly, that your relationships are harmonious and nurturing, that opportunities pursue you, that every challenge resolves in your favor. The content of the decision doesn't matter. The principle does. Whatever you decide with conviction becomes your lived experience. But conviction doesn't mean physical force. It doesn't require tension, effort, or stress. True decision feels serene. It feels natural. It feels inevitable. It carries the quiet authority of knowing rather than the strained urgency of hoping. You can't fake this feeling. It arises when you truly shift your inner assumption. You know you've decided when you no longer look for signs or reassurance. You simply rest in the knowing. And the moment you rest in that knowing, the world responds. You may not see immediate evidence, but the wheels are already turning. People begin to shift. Circumstances begin to align. Paths you never noticed before illuminate themselves. What once felt blocked will open. What once seemed improbable will unfold naturally. This happens because your decision alters your state, and your state alters the world you experience. You're not attracting from the outside. You're selecting from the inside. Every desire you hold exists already in the field of possibility. Decision is the act of claiming one of those possibilities as your reality. The moment you say, "This is mine," and occupy the feeling of its truth, life becomes fluid when you adopt this mindset. You stop resisting, you stop doubting, you stop emotionally wrestling with appearances. Instead, you assume the end with calm certainty. You allow the world to catch up. You trust the invisible process unfolding beneath the surface. This way of living brings an extraordinary level of peace. You no longer feel threatened by uncertainty. because you understand that uncertainty is simply the space where the new reality takes form. You no longer feel anxious about the future because you already know the future you've chosen. You no longer feel trapped by the past because you no longer use the past to define what's possible. Decision frees you from time. It places you in the eternal now, where the future is already fulfilled internally. And as you continue living from this state, manifestations begin to appear more quickly. The time between decision and realization shortens. Because the more familiar you become with the feeling of decision, the more easily you occupy the state of fulfillment. And the more easily you occupy that state, the faster the external world aligns with it. Manifestation becomes a natural process rather than a desperate chase. There will come a moment when you realize you've been the orchestrator of your life all along. Every chapter, both the joyful and the painful, was shaped by inner assumptions you were often unaware of. But now, with awareness, you can choose deliberately. You can create consciously. You can step into the identity of someone whose life unfolds with grace and ease. Everything works out when you decide it does. And when you begin to embody this truth, when you begin to think from the end, when you begin to rest in the feeling of the fulfilled desire, life transforms in ways you can't predict but will absolutely recognize. You'll look back and see that the turning point wasn't a lucky break, wasn't a sudden opportunity, wasn't the intervention of someone else. It was the moment you decided internally. And so as you stand at this very moment in your journey, remember, nothing outside you has the authority to dictate your future. The power has always been within you, quietly waiting for your recognition, patiently waiting for your embrace. Life bends not to chance, not to luck, not to circumstance, but to the one who decides. When you choose the outcome within, the outer world bows to that choice with unwavering obedience. Every path clears, every obstacle dissolves, every detail aligns, because you've chosen the state from which you live. You are not at the mercy of life. You are the author of it. You are not the victim of events. You are the creator of them. Everything you desire, everything you dream of, everything you long for already exists in the unseen, waiting for your decision to bring it into form. Choose boldly, decide with confidence, claim your power without hesitation. When you decide that everything works out for you, you step into a life where the impossible becomes ordinary and the miraculous becomes natural. Let this be the moment you draw a line through the old story and declare with absolute conviction that things work out for you from this day forward. And the world, as it always does, will rise to meet the truth of your decision.